Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Get Literary. Today, I'm here with Susan Edwards Richmond, author of Bird Count. We'll talk with Susan about her inspirations, her passions, and her love for nature.
Wake up, sleepyhead. It's Bird Count Day. Each winter, we help scientists by counting birds. Count every bird you see or hear. Make sure at least 2 people see or hear it. And don't count any bird twice. Bird Count. Written by Susan Edwards Richmond. Illustrated by Stephanie Pfizer Coleman. Be inspired to be a citizen scientist.
So let's welcome our guest, Susan Richmond. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Leslie. I'm really excited to be here.
I am fascinated by your stories, your experiences. Tell me a little bit about you. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and what got you started in writing.
Well, I've been writing in some fashion ever since I was a small child. I've just always been drawn to nature and being out in the outside world, and always had a notebook with me, jotting down poems and stories. But I definitely got more serious in college and decided that I actually wanted to pursue that as, I don't know if you're ever fully a professional writer until you make a living, which very few people do, but it's definitely been a thread throughout all of my career decisions, either the environment or writing in some fashion. So more recently, I've turned from I did poetry for many years and had my degree in that from the University of California, Davis. But really, it was when I had my own children that I started reading picture books again and really fell in love with children's literature and realized that for me, a picture book was really very much like a poem. It had many of the characteristics of poems, especially the ones that I loved the most. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
So tell us a little bit about Bird Count and Ava, the main character in the story.
Great. So Bird Count was kind of the perfect melding of all of my interests, because I've now become an early child educator as well. So I'm really interested in this age group, but also a passionate birder all my life, since birding with my family. And then this particular book is about really based on experiences that I have had myself. So totally apart from writing, I've been involved in the birding community and have taken part in an annual Christmas bird count for the last 15 years or so. And for the audience that doesn't know what that means, it doesn't really have anything to do with Christmas specifically. It's just that that's when it takes place at that time of the year. It's a count that's been going on for over 100 years. It's the longest citizen science survey, longest running citizen science survey in the world. It was started by the National Audubon Society as a sort of a census, a way to take count of the number of resident birds, the birds that stay all year. So the other kinds of counts take place at different types of the year, but during this period, which runs between around December 15th and the first week of January, communities, not just in the United States, but actually all throughout the Western Hemisphere, can take part in this count. So people are birding all over the United States and also in Canada, and there's even counts in Antarctica to kind of see who's our resident birds.
What's that process like? What does that mean to go on a bird count specifically?
Yeah. So I thought it would be a perfect fit for a children's book because there is this element of adventure and seek and find. So actually this book has gone through many transformations in the process of editing, working with my editor. My original idea was just that it was kind of this beautiful illustrated book where the children would be able to spot the birds and identify the birds in the same way that I do when I'm in the field. So essentially we get up early in the morning. The count is really 24 hours. It's midnight to midnight, but Um, Sometimes people do get up a little earlier or stay up all night listening for owls. So that's a sort of a separate part of the count. We do a little bit, we just sort of, start at around 6 or 6:30 and say, can we hear an owl? And then we can listen again later. But essentially, as soon as it's light, we just kind of hit the road, and each team, it's divided into teams. It's very methodical. So in a state, you might have a number of different circles, and each circle has territories. So I live in Massachusetts, in sort of the Metro West area, in a town that borders Concord, Massachusetts, which might be the one that some of the listeners might be more familiar with. And so we are all divided into territories, and I have a team with one or two other people. Generally, it's a team of three. My team leader is Al Segroy, and he is actually the character of Big Al in my book. So I'll just show you, this is the book, but I'll show you a picture of Big Al. But he doesn't really look like this. But he's the only character in the book that is actually modeled after a real human being. And so we go out and we have a territory. We go from place to place. We don't just look in one place, because ours is several miles across. So ours is in a town, so we go through neighborhoods, we go through conservation land, we go through the center of town. And the wonderful thing about birding is that there are birds everywhere. And there are certain types of counts where you're counting every species, so that once you've seen like a robin, okay, fine, I've seen a robin, who cares? But the wonderful thing about the bird count is everybody counts. It's a census. So, I see 5 robins, I see 10 robins. Every robin is important. Every woodpecker is important. So we keep our tally sheets. And actually, I've made some simpler ones. So if a younger audience wants to go out, you can create your own pictorial guide. We use field guides, and for a lot of the birds that we see during the winter here in Massachusetts, they're ones that we're pretty familiar with. It's unusual for us to find a bird that is extremely rare, although it does happen. And in the book Bird Count, the character Ava, who's a child who is not really modeled after any particular child, maybe a little bit of me in there, but there's a little bit of me and her mom as well, and other children that I've worked with and have taught. So she has a passion to see a raven, which is unusual around here, or actually they're getting a little more common, but we don't often see them on the bird count. But she saw one once and she remembered. And so throughout the book, there's sort of this thread that, does she want to see a raven? She wants to see a raven, and is that a raven? And is not, what is a raven? And through her identification of different birds, the book also teaches families, children, how to identify some of our familiar birds in this area. Of course, we realize that this is a regional count, so everyone throughout the country may have a different set of birds that they would see. And one of the really wonderful, heartening things about the book is that at first I was a little concerned that maybe only people who were in the Northeast or the Northeast and Midwest would identify with the book because those are their birds. But it's actually not been the case at all. People all over the country have been excited to use the techniques that they're learning to find their own birds. So that's been, people from the Pacific Northwest and the Southwest and the Southeast have all given a lot of positive feedback to the experience of learning about birding through this book.
What do you hope that children gain from reading this book? What is your message you're trying to send out to them?
Well, first of all, I hope that they just enjoy it and have fun. But I think that, it's kind of ironic because it is a book, so it's something that you're generally doing inside. But what I really want to do with the book is ignite kids' passion about the outdoors and about exploring nature. I mean, this is through birding, but it doesn't have to be birding. It's just the excitement of getting outside. And I think that another important message is that everybody's community and everybody's neighborhood has nature in it. And you don't have to go online, and it's nice to see a video about a rainforest in South America or the African plains, but the fact is that even in an urban environment, there are peregrine falcons nesting on the buildings. There are migrating birds who come through, and you can see a variety of warblers and fascinating birds during a spring migration. So just getting out and observing whatever's in your community, I want kids to be excited about that, because then you become invested in the place where you live. And I think that's really what we need in this world today, is to become invested in our own communities as well as the world.
What you said, I think is so true, especially during the pandemic. I think
Mm,
that we've all, as parents, been exploring our communities, especially when the lockdown, at least in New York, was more really strict and you couldn't really go anywhere, right? You had to kind of stick in your community, your town. Maybe you can drive somewhere, but there can't be people there. And it really got us exploring our surroundings. I know people went on scavenger hunts, people were printing bird watching guides and animal guides, and just to learn what's around you. We really, in recent years, parents, children, everybody kind of has a lot of, I'm speaking for those of us that are more suburban, urban, uh,
right.
we've kind of separated from nature just because their children are in school, and when they're not in school, they're in an after school program. Then they get home and they watch TV, and maybe they go outside for a little bit. That was just the daily routine. And I'm noticing on social media what a change it has been in the past few months. People really had to find ways to enjoy the outdoors. More people are going camping and renting RVs and just taking a tent outside, going for walks, looking for their local nature trail
Mm,
where they can go. And I think it's really been beautiful to see, myself included. My family would look at trips within a 30-minute radius because, there were no restrooms to be used at that point. So we had to find somewhere we can take the kids and be back in time in case they needed to use the restroom, which led us to bays and nature trails and hiking trails that we never knew existed. And I think your book right now speaks volumes to the fact that beauty is all around us. It's outdoors. Just open your eyes. It's so funny, actually, what I'm looking at is in my awning, birds build a nest every season. So this season, specifically because we've been home,
yeah.
every day my kids come out, they get to see what's going on. The other day we actually saw the bird jump off the awning and it's learning how to fly, the baby. Last
Oh.
week we saw the mother coming back and forth to feed the little ones. We would have never seen that before because
Mm.
we're so kind of entrenched in our routines, that we've been jaded, quite honestly. So I love the message that your book is sending. Tell
Yeah.
me about the process. You mentioned that it went through several drafts.
Yes.
How did the idea of the book start, and what was its journey until what you're holding in your hands?
Mhm. I've actually been working on children's book manuscripts for probably close to 20 years. My own children are in their 20s, and my interest started when they were probably like 3, 4, 5 years old. So it's been a passion for a long time, and I've learned a lot through the process. I quickly joined a writing group. It's a national group called the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And I've just learned a lot through that community, because I think people tend to think that a picture book is kind of easy to write because it's short. Especially now, like many picture books are under 1,000 words, a lot are even under 500 words. So the tendency is to think, oh, anyone can do it. But because it is it is more like a poem, and it's also an educational tool, and it's also, you have a very specific audience. I mean, you want to attract adults because they're the ones that are going to be purchasing the book, but you really want the children to enjoy it, because if the children don't enjoy it, then it's just going to go by the wayside. So there's a lot of factors, and first of all, you have to do a lot of reading, and I think that's why, for me, raising my children and reading just tons and tons of picture books with them made me start thinking about what's the structure of a picture book. What are the picture books I admire? What do I like? Who are the authors that I think I can really learn something from? So I think when this idea came along, I had kind of decided that one thing that I really wanted to do was sort of have people talk about, writing what you know, and I don't think that you necessarily have to write what you know, but you do have to write what you really care about, because that's going to come through. And if you don't know it, then you can research it and learn it. And even with this book where I knew a lot, I still had to do a little research. I mean, every picture book manuscript I write, there's a research process that's involved, just because you want to get it right. I mean, you might think, well, I know approximately how long it takes for a bird's, to lay its egg and then that one to hatch. But then you think, well, if I'm going to talk about a specific kind of bird, there is a specific cycle. So I need to research how long is the egg, how long is the bird sitting on the egg? When do they hatch? How long are they, when do their feathers grow? So there's always an element of research. So that's really I think that people need to embrace that as authors and think, wow, this is really an exciting part. And when I first started writing this book, I did send it out to a couple different editors. The editor who eventually picked it up and the publishing company Peachtree was someone in my critique group. It's sort of, again, it helps to have this community, had suggested, because she writes a lot of nonfiction and informational fiction books as well. So I sent to her and she liked it, but was not ready to accept it and just said, well, these are the things. And she wrote a very long letter. And again, it took me years to realize that whenever an editor responds with anything more than, thank you very much, this doesn't quite meet our needs, whenever they start being specific, it means that they are open to the book. So I decided I'm really going to listen to the feedback. I'm going to incorporate it. Even without a definite yes, I'm going to ride this through. So I ended up working with this one editor, Vicki Hollifield, for pretty much a full year. Went through, and not just like tweaks, but major re-envisioning, because I had a vision for the book, she had a vision for the book, and what she really was interested in was that not just that children would get excited about seeking and finding, but that this was a real thing. Like, this was real science here, and people really did this. So she wanted to bring out my expertise in birding. How did I identify a bird? What kinds of habitats was I in? What did I look for in terms of call or the way they fly, or all these very specific things. So suddenly it was this big task, and it seemed monumental to me that with under 1,000 words, it ended up being a little over actually, but my original thought, under 1,000 words, I've got to have a story arc, I've got to have an engaging character, I have to get kids excited about the journey and the adventure, and I also have to explain about the bird count itself, what it is, how it works, and how this child goes about identifying birds. So I just remember coming to my first couple of critique groups after some of the feedback and going, I can't do this. I don't know. But they took me through it. And after like the fourth major revision, my editor finally said, yes, we'll take it. We're excited about it. And then they started looking for the process of finding an illustrator, which is a whole other segment of picture book writing, which is unique to that genre. But I was so grateful that I had my community that supported me, and that I had this editor that believed in the book, and that I believed in myself enough to stick through it, to do it through as long as it took, as many revisions as it took.
Well, it looks like your hard work paid off, because you were selected a Parents' Choice Silver Award winner.
I was very excited to get that. I was totally blown away to be able to say, I'm an award-winning picture book author on my first book. So that was really a great boost for the book. I'm very fortunate with Peachtree Publishing Company. They are extremely good to their authors in terms of their books. They're very great in supporting the books that they accept. So although I have definitely had a large role to play in publicizing my own work, which I'll talk about in a moment, but they also did. I mean, they were sending advanced reading copies to all kinds of reviewers, to bloggers, to these award competitions. So they have a list and they send this stuff out. they also asked me, and they were definitely book awards that I knew about, like the New England Book Awards or Massachusetts Book Awards, that I said, would you mind, would you like me to submit to it, or would you like to submit to it? Usually they would, although sometimes they would say that I could as well. They helped me get conference engagements, and they sent the book to advanced readers so that before the book even came out, there were reviews on Goodreads and Amazon. You can't have reviews until the book actually is published, but people had already seen the book. And of course, if the book isn't successful, it's not going to be successful, but it's nice to have that kind of support. So I know sometimes people say, in this day and age, we can just self-publish our own books, and you can, and sometimes that's the path that people choose and it's the best path for them. But I have to say that I was really grateful to have a publisher that really has been tremendously supportive in getting the word out about the book.
What have been some of the responses and feedback you've received from either people that you know or readers from around the world? How has that been?
Well, it's been very exciting. I have to say that one of the big surprises for me was social media is a big part of promotion in the children's book world now. I mean, in a lot of areas, of course it is, but I had to get on Twitter. I was not tweeting at the time that this book came out, and I had to get on because that's where the children's book community resides, and that's where teachers and librarians and authors and editors and agents, they're all on Twitter looking. So there's a lot of that kind of mutual support as well. And a lot of bloggers who initially wrote about this book were contacted by either me or by Peachtree. But sometimes people would they saw the book or they saw an advanced reading copy in a conference and contacted me. Maria Marshall is one who does wonderful blogging about mostly informational science or informational fiction books. And she just saw a copy in a conference and contacted me. And first I thought, is this like for real? Is this a, cause you get spam and whatever. I'm like, did someone really see my book that I don't know and want to write about it on the internet? I was so excited. And then it would happen, like every once in a while I would be on Twitter and suddenly I would see someone retweeting something about my book. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'd follow it to a blog that I didn't even know I had never contacted. Peachtree had never contacted, someone just found it. So Kate Messner, who is a wonderful children's book author of all ages and genres, actually coordinates authors who want to be available for Skype visits, particularly for World Read Aloud Day. So I gave her my contact information, and the first time I got I got contacted by a school from, I don't know if the first one was in Washington State or Oregon, or people were contacting me from other parts of the country. And that was how I first knew that people were really reading it outside of the Northeast or the Eastern Seaboard. And they were so excited to have me come and speak to their class. And I was like thrilled. So I did a couple on World Read Aloud Day, but then other people were like, oh, we can't do the times you have, but would you mind doing it a different day or a different week, which I'm sure you come up with. So I did a bunch of those, and it was just so rewarding to talk to the kids from different parts of the country directly. And a lot of them had formulated questions that they wanted to ask. And it was just a really great feeling.
When we started the nonprofit, we were really a community-based project. And slowly we were growing. It seemed very quick to us. And all of a sudden, people would find us on social media and tag us in a post. Hey, did you hear about this nonprofit in Long Island that's donating books? Let's get involved. And that turned into someone in Seattle sending an email. We'd like to help run a book drive on your behalf and donate in our community. And I would also get these reposts and mentions and tags. It's so gratifying to know you're making an impact. Not that you're certainly doing it for the reputation of that, right? You're doing it because you know you love what you're doing. But it does feel rewarding when people see the work you've put in, the results of it, and the
word's getting out. I mean, I think I saw I think it was from a Twitter post actually that I learned about Hindi's libraries.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
just
that,
followed it to the site and I thought, wow, this is what a wonderful group. I hadn't heard about you before. And then
right.
I saw you were starting this series. I thought, wow, that's so great.
So we actually started this series during the quarantine because we would typically, like, when organizations are in the New York area that we send books to, we prefer to drop them off and do an interactive,
Mm,
read aloud,
absolutely.
hands-on activity and really get to know the children.
Mm,
Of course, when we're shipping out of state, we don't have that opportunity. But when everything shut down, we really felt like we weren't connecting to our supporters.
mm,
And at the beginning of the pandemic, people were kind of nervous to either donate books or take books that have been donated and work with them to review them because really people didn't want to leave their house or touch anything. And we really
right.
felt this separation. So we started the podcast. First of all, connecting with children's authors is an aspect we always wanted to reach, but never quite knew how. And now this is a great opportunity to just meet other people who are passionate about writing, about literacy, about reading, about getting books into the hands of children, but also to do something productive while, we were stuck at home. And it's really been awesome. We've met some really great people. And actually, one of the authors I interviewed last month, her name is Diane Kane. She actually sent about 5 books, and we have a goal. We're trying to reach 100,000 books collected by the end
Wow.
of summer, because actually Hindi, who we're, named after, she passed away mid-August 2 years ago.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
see.
trying to reach this goal kind of in her honor
Hmm.
by the time the date rolls around or the month rolls around. And Diane Kane actually sent these 5 books. And as I was counting our collections, her book, one of the 5, was number 99,000. So
Oh,
it's been so exciting to
that's
meet
great.
people from all over and just continue our mission, learn about your mission, and just talk to passionate people. It's really been wonderful. Susan, I have a question. What is
Yep.
your writing space like? Do you go out and write while you're like, do you
That's a really good question. I do actually really like to write outdoors. So I would say with the children's writing, it's a little hybrid. Writing poetry, I really almost always began writing outside. Um, I never experienced writer's block because there was always something around me to write about. And in fact, in my community, I've been organizing for the last like 6 or 7 years what we call a plein air poetry walk out open air. So a friend of mine is an artist who owns a farm and it's this beautiful property. So we've been inviting poets to come and write each year out in the open air on a theme. And then we usually have a poetry walk in September where they read their poems and we put together a chapbook. So that whole idea of open air writing and being inspired by nature is really, really important to me. So I think that often with the picture books, I am out doing something when I'm inspired, or I'm writing about something that I do outside or in the outside world. Like with this is something that I, regularly did. So I had lots of notes from my experiences. So once I had all those experiences and ideas and notes, then I would come inside and put it into the manuscript. So I'm not someone who sits outside with their laptop. I actually don't even have a laptop, which is kind of crazy. I still use a desktop computer, but I still have my notebooks and I still do a lot of writing of ideas. If I overhear sometimes a child say something or someone say something, I want to catch it and write it down. Or maybe before I go to bed at night, I have an issue like something in my book that I'm trying to work out. I'll make some notes and think about it and write in my notebook before going to bed. So it's kind of a combination. The serious putting together the manuscript takes place in my little office where I have a window looking at the trees outside and my bookshelf with all my field guides on the top shelf and children's books. But otherwise it's either outdoors or other places in my house.
You mentioned earlier that you kind of were inspired by a lot of the children's books you've read to your own children. what are some of the books that have, come across your way that have inspired you?
So the ones that that's interesting. When I was reading to my children, one of my favorite books was Miss Rumphius by Barbara Cooney. If you're familiar, are you familiar with that book? It's just, it's so moving because, I mean, it's about a woman who, I mean, she never married. She had three goals in her life: to travel and learn about the world, to live by the sea, and to make the world a more beautiful place. And this is, I mean, that's the story of the person who's relating it to a child. And so it's beautiful because it does, the illustrations are gorgeous. And she's traveling around the world, and then she comes back to her home in Maine, but she finds a way to make the world more beautiful. And so it's kind of like inviting children to think also for themselves, like, what do I want to do in life? What's important to me? And maybe there's something that I can do to make the world a more beautiful place. So that always has had a very special place in my heart. There's another book by Melissa Sweet that's called A House by the Sea, which I just was so fun to read. It's a poem, and it starts out, if I lived in a little house, I'd live in a house by the sea. And it just sort of swings along through these fantastical images of children playing on the beach, a child who's reciting the poem with her friend or with his friend, and enjoying octopuses and seashells and dipping their pails, and just sort of outside adventure. Cynthia Rylant is an author that I really love. I think Night in the Country is one of the ones that I really, just for a very simple picture book, just listening. It's a great model for how to incorporate all the senses into your work. So those are some, but we also read, Go Dog Go, and some of the fun books like Diana Hutz Aston's A Nest is Noisy, An Egg is Quiet, which I've read to my preschoolers. I teach in a nature-based preschool. So those are a lot of fun because the illustrations are beautiful. There are things that the kids can really relate to. And there's always sort of a layer of poetic text. And then there's a more informational layer that you can use to enhance kids' knowledge if they want to go that far, or you might just read the first layer.
I like the message that you relayed in the first book. I think that you had said with the woman who had traveled, right?
Yep.
Something you had mentioned is one of her goals was to make life to make the world a better place, rather.
Yes.
And how it doesn't take much.
Mm.
And I think that's something that, by the way, even what your book is portraying is just a child going out there and connecting with nature and being a part of something bigger.
Right.
Just by taking a walk with a pen and paper and counting. Kind of related, right? I mean, we talk about loving the world, loving the environment and the earth, but also making a difference. And it doesn't always take that much to do that. Whether you are involved in a local organization that is counting birds or environmental cleanup, our school work, we partner with the Audubon Society locally, and we make signs for the spring seasons that go to the beach. And it talks about this is a natural habitat, please be careful. Whatever it is that you're a part of, it doesn't always take that much to do good. And I really enjoy that message. And that's a book I would love to learn more about and read to my children.
Thank you so much.
And I thank you. And tell us, Susan, when you're not writing or birding or teaching, I went on your website and I see that you love to do nature trails and hiking. What are some of your hobbies?
Well, I do, especially I have to say during the pandemic, there's been a lot more time. We taught on Zoom for a while after we couldn't do in-person classes, which didn't take nearly enough time because you can only Zoom so long with preschoolers, not the whole 3-hour class, as you might suspect. So this spring was a great May because I was able to get out during the migration season and just bird a lot and I live near some national wildlife refuges and a lot of conservation land. So I did a lot of birding, which was great. I love to read. I read adult books and poetry, adult novels and poetry as well. but I've been reading a lot more middle grade and young adult fiction lately, partly because I am working on a middle grade novel, so I want to get a little more sense of that rhythm. But I just also just love the writing. I love the level at which it's written, and the engagement with the children is great. So I do love theater, although we haven't done my husband and I both love to go out and see live performances of things, which definitely we've had a damper on that. But we've been enjoying National Theatre Company of London was doing live, not live stream, but they were doing streaming of plays that had been pre-recorded, and we would sort of make a theater night. We'd get dressed up a little, make some popcorn, and take our seats.
Tell our viewers where they can find your books and where they can connect with you.
Okay. Well, you can definitely connect with me on my website. I have my emails there. There are ways to contact me there at susanedwardsrichmond.com. I'm also on Twitter at Susan Ed Richmond, and you can contact me on Twitter as well. I also am on Facebook, Susan Edwards Richmond. The book is available on any of your favorite independent sites. It's also available on Amazon. And what I often ask people to do is to try to get it from your local bookstore, because I really like to support my local bookstore as much as possible, or we have several bookstores in the area. Silver Unicorn Books in West Acton is the bookstore that did my launch. And I was very fortunate that I launched last fall before the pandemic happened. My heart goes out to people who are launching, especially their debut books in this season. It's much more difficult, but I always like to just tell people, ask your local bookstore. It should be easily available, and it's a way of supporting them and getting the word out. Well, I think probably like the last couple lines of Miss Rumphy is the one that always gets me choked up, and I don't think I can actually quote them exactly, but it's something like, the child has just said, I too want to travel the world, and I too want to come home to live by the sea. Her last line is, I don't know yet what that might be. I don't know what I will be able to do to make the world more beautiful, but it's just this beautiful spread, that final spread with those words. I don't know yet what that might be. And it's like the whole world is open to her. Like she could do anything. And I just love, that's such a hopeful message for children, that they, like you said, like we were talking about earlier, they can make a difference. It doesn't have to be something huge, and they can choose it. It's open to them. No one has to tell them what they need to do. They can choose it themselves, and the world is open for them to make those choices. And I guess that's what we hope for all of our children, that they have those choices, that they can make those choices.
I agree. I think these days we have to remind our children, you can make a difference. You will make a difference. Just have that passion, have that will to do good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been telling people. People call me and they say, I really want to help you, but I can't make a donation. I don't need a donation necessarily. Run a book drive, have people donate books that they're not using, and we'll find someone in your community who works with children that can benefit from those books. That's all. Or read a book, find somewhere where you can read aloud. There are so many ways people can get involved and make a change and make an impact. Susan, I thank you for your time. I thank you for sharing the story of bird counts and Ava and your personal experiences. And I look forward to seeing what comes next. I'd love to touch base when your middle grade novel comes out.
It might be a while.
Hopefully we will.
Other things will come out before that, but
I would love to learn more and share these great vibes with you, and enjoy the beauty of our world together.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie. It was wonderful to talk to you. I really appreciated learning so much more about what you do in these libraries, and have a chance to connect with your audience.